Welcome back, everybody. And speaking of welcome back, we have to welcome back for the second time to the show. I think you're the first, by the way, first person to come back for a second episode. So this is a
Oh,
major milestone. So
that's good to
welcome.
hear.
Yeah, it's awesome. Ken Schwartz, welcome. Thank you for joining us. So the first time you came on, we dove deep into understanding a product that you're working on. We're going to talk about that because people need to understand that there's other solutions out there beyond popping pills that can potentially do a better job. Uh, but your history and sort of the science of what drove you there is, fascinating. And maybe we'll get into your personal story first because, all great sort of solutions come from major problems we find when it comes to healthcare. So tell us about a bit about your background and how you got to where you are today.
Well, I guess I've been a lot of things. The way this broke up, I'm actually have a master's in biogeochemistry, but I ended up doing fusion reactor research and metal oxygen fusion. You'll probably read about it in the newspapers one day. We kind of gotten on that because of Fukushima and all that kind of disaster, getting a safe and so reasonably safe and useful new source of energy was kind of something. And it's metal oxygen fusion has been around for a while, but people hadn't really worked. Well, some people had worked on it, but the problem was it was the late professor this and the dead doctor that, and that was one of the problems. And so I went looking out for a solution, because it was research. People didn't really know what we were doing. That's why we call it research. And I didn't want my crew or myself to have a bad outcome. So I went out looking for another radiation protection besides the shielding we were doing, because there's sometimes you don't always get everything right. And I discovered this stuff called carbon 60. Its science name is Buckminster fullerene. And the science is they basically gave it to one set of rats, got the carbon 60. The other set of rats, the control rats, didn't get anything. They hit them with a fatal dose of radiation. The carbon 60 rats lived, while the control rats all died. So after I learned about that, I said, oh, that's the stuff for us. And so I bought a couple of supplies from a couple of sources, and we were using it during the experiment. We're all still around, by the way. And but after the experiment, I kept using it because things I noticed during when I was using it, I had a little bit more energy and mental focus, and those afternoon blahs you get after eating lunch, you want to go take a nap, that kind of went away. And so I kept using it. About 7 months later, I went in to see my eye doctor, optometrist, and he found that my drusen, or dry macular degeneration, had completely disappeared.
Hmm.
And he was kind of surprised because he'd never seen that happen in his many decades of service. He was a pretty old guy. That kind of got it on. But one experience like that, I'm a scientist. One example is not enough. Well, in the meantime, my electrical engineer, Gary Rodriguez, type 2 diabetes, he had developed severe wet macular degeneration because of that.
Right.
And so I made a formulation for him. I'm not sure if people can see, but I put it in, I found how to, got some C60, I put it into MCT coconut oil. And people didn't know, but MCT stands for medium chain triglycerides. And
Hmm.
basically, your liver can take that and instantly, pretty very quickly, turn that into ketones, which then your cells can use as a fuel source. So you could either be glucose, and if you have glucose processing issues, obviously having another fuel source like ketones is a really good idea. That's why I put it in there. And and then after taking a year, taking a tablespoon of C60 and MCT oil, his wet macular degeneration completely disappeared as well. And we used to be able to post before and after pictures, but some three-letter agency said that's making sense, and we had to take them down. But and we've had other people with similar results, and so that kind of started the whole thing. So I learned how to make preparations for myself and family, friends, and such, and then I shared it with my healthcare alternative people who've had good results, and they gave it to their patients, and they had good results, and that's kind of how the whole C60 Purple Power started.
Yeah, it makes sense because you're you're talking about macular degeneration, and here's the funny thing that doctors will agree that they're taught that this is a disease rooted in oxidative stress. They know that, but they don't then ask what is the oxidative stress rooted in, and they don't then ask how do I deal with the oxidative stress. They say here's a disease that comes out of something called oxidative stress. Let's just manage and treat the disease. And now someone like you comes along and says, guess what, I reversed it, not once, twice, and maybe many other times. And some or like you said, regulatory body won't let you talk about it because you're reframing what is the reality is. The reality is the disease doesn't need to happen if we know why it happened. So getting back to the oxidative stress, really we were talking about mitochondrial health here, and maybe we can get really into the micro, because one thing we haven't done yet on the show is we talked at a macro level about the mitochondria. But let's zoom in like Ant-Man style, and let's drop down into the mitochondria. Tell us what's happening at the cellular level and why this is so important.
Okay, well, the first off is getting it into the cells. So when you take
Yeah.
C60, C60 is hydrophobic, so it won't dissolve in water at all. So it has to be dissolved in oil. And we picked out healthy oils. We got olive oil, avocado oil, MCT coconut oil. Any of those are fine. It'll pass your gut barrier, goes along with the oils. Then it'll pass the blood-brain barrier, and then it's taken up by the cells through endocytosis, and then the mitochondria will take it up through endocytosis. And what it's characterized as, the research came along. It's put a while to put this together. It's been like a big jigsaw puzzle, and there's still a lot of pieces missing. But they found that C60 is what's characterized as an SOD catalase mimic. And
Mm.
SOD stands for superoxide dismutase, and catalase is, and usually it takes care of superoxide. And the mitochondria are little energy powerhouses of your cell. They take, they take ketones and sugars and turn them into ATP and a whole variety of other basic building blocks. And as a little powerhouse, they produce pollution, right? Just
Hmm.
like anything else. And they produce superoxide. And superoxide is an oxygen with an extra electron. So if anything was to cause rusting and oxidative damage, that's going to be it. And obviously our body provides SOD and catalase to take care of that, because what it does, SOD takes the superoxide, turns it into hydrogen peroxide. Then catalase turns that hydrogen peroxide back into a water and an oxygen. And so that's kind of the way it is. But C60 is an SOD mimic, but it's interesting that C60, basically it's a little spherical shaped molecule, 60 carbon atoms. It actually will it will actually take it takes a positive charge by taking hydrogen ions from the environment and stores it on the inside of its cage-like structure. Specifically in the mitochondria, the outer membrane of the mitochondria is positively charged because it has a lot of hydrogen ions, positively charged hydrogen ions, whereas the inner membrane of the mitochondria is negatively charged. That's kind of where electrons build up. So what C60 does, especially in the mitochondria where you got a lot of SOD, C60 will fill up. It actually pulls up to 6 of those hydrogen ions on the inside of its hollow cage-like structure. If people are just listening, imagine it. It looks exactly like a little tiny soccer ball, but with kind of holes, and so it can pull at least hydrogen ions in and out. And and what it does is it basically, the SOD gets a positive charge. The SOD superoxide is negatively charged. So when it actually sticks to or is attracted to the C60, the C60 actually takes the electron, donates it to one of those positive hydrogen ions, turning it into a hydrogen gas, and then just releases the superoxide, turns back to a regular oxygen, which would go back into the Krebs cycle. And so the C60 sort of resets itself. And that's one of its key things. It can reset itself again and again and again. And so basically it travels between the outer membrane, becomes positively charged. Now it's attracted toward the inner membrane, which is negatively charged. And along the way, it neutralizes superoxides and the occasional hydroxyl ion that it runs into. And then, of course, after it runs out of that positive hydrogen ions, some hydrogen ions, superoxides will stick to it, give it a negative charge, and then it's attracted back to the outer membrane where it neutralizes any of those negative charges it has on it, refills with hydrogen ions, and heads back up. So you could have like hundreds of thousands of little C60 molecules bouncing back and forth between the outer and inner membranes of the mitochondria, neutralizing superoxides and the hydrogen and the hydroxyl ion.
That's incredible because you're essentially saying here's this source of oxidation, and it's going to be happening. And you're adding in a tool that very specifically goes in and targets it. And if you don't have that tool, what is your body doing on its own, if anything? Meaning, is this something that are we enhancing an existing process, or are we completely adding in something new that the body's not even doing?
Well, usually the body produces SOD, superoxide dismutase and catalase, to neutralize those superoxides. and and which is, and when you're young, it's probably you probably have enough. But a lot of people, as they grow older, produce a lot less SOD and
Mhm.
catalase. And so the mitochondria actually have their own DNA, and they kind of have a little self-regulating. So if SOD levels go down, the mitochondria will actually adjust and reduce their production of SOD. They basically turn slow, they got a little knob there, and they can basically reduce their production of ATP and pregnenolone and all the other things that they make to, because they're getting damaged, right? They don't want to get oxidatively damaged. And so that's the problem with, for people, as you get older, now your cells aren't getting enough ATP
Mm.
or pregnenolone, and so your hormone levels drop and your energy levels drop, and that's, people say, that's what people notice about a lot about aging. Well, I just don't have any energy, and I can't get it up because all
Yeah.
those different things that come with aging. Well, it's basically being caused by the body not being able to produce enough SOD. So when you take C60 as an SOD mimic, it just replaces that missing SOD, and so your mitochondria can crank back up and start producing more ATP and more pregnenolone and precursors for RNA and DNA synthesis, and general your cells work better, and therefore general health improves.
So a lot of people today, as they mature, are getting onto hormone therapies to maintain levels. So are you suggesting that if you use carbon 60 to charge the cells and maintain it at its prime, that hormones are going to stay balanced and you may not need that third party intervention of like a BHRT?
Well, yes, I'm not a medical doctor. I cannot give medical advice, but I
Sure.
can tell you anecdotal situations that have happened with some of our patients. Here's a typical one. You have a 71-year-old guy. He goes down to his doctor. His doctor, he has a testosterone level of 350, which is
Mm.
kind of low. So his doctor gives him some creams, and uh, and he's up in the low 700s. He's been doing this for a couple of years, right? It's nothing new. Well, he goes in, he starts using C60, and a couple months later, he goes in to get his biannual testing, and his testosterone level is 1200.
Wow.
And so the doctor reduces his creams. So that's kind of an example of what can happen with C60. So it definitely, what it does is C60 produces goes in the mitochondria. Mitochondria take LDL cholesterol and
Yeah.
turn it into pregnenolone, which is the precursor molecule for all the hormones. So, by the way, people that take C60 also notice a drop in LDL cholesterol. So that's because that's being, instead of going around floating around your bloodstream and eventually oxidizing and sticking to your arteries, it's actually being used by your cells to do the things it's supposed to do, like make to like pregnenolone. And so that's basically kind of the process, but it goes everywhere. So you'll get more melatonin in your pineal gland. So people will
Mm.
notice, oh, you get a little bit better sleep. Uh, we've had we've had people go, well, Hashimoto's, they've been able to reduce the amount of thyroid medicine because they got more T in 3 and 4. And this does bring it up. Also, I need to bring up there is a counterindication on this because it also increases production of pregnenolone in your adrenals. So you get more androgens, more glucocorticoids, and mineralocorticoids. And one of the things mineralocorticoids do is regulate your blood, quote, thickness. That's not
Mm.
really a medical term, but that's what they use. And so if you're on a blood thinner and you take C60, the cause of your blood being thick actually will go away, and so now your blood moves toward a more normal level, right? But if you're on a blood thinner, now your blood can be too thin.
Mm.
So if you're on a blood thinner and you use C60, consult with your doctor, get more testing, because the underlying cause of your blood being, quote, thick goes away, and that's just something you need to be aware of.
Yeah, and for people listening, it sounds like, well, how is this miracle liquid doing all this different stuff? And it's not that it's individually targeting and resolving these problems. When you have an innate support of the mitochondria, then the root cause of so many multiple problems goes away. And what you're saying is you're bringing the cell to its utmost best health. And so the things that come with aging don't come. So ultimately, you're slowing aging down.
Yes, that's pretty much what it is. And we discovered a few things. This is putting the puzzle together. Actually, I've been part of it. Another one of the things that C60 takes care of is the hydroxyl ion,
Mm.
and any hydroxyl ions actually. Usually it's just a plain hydroxyl ion. That's actually what radiation produces. And a hydroxyl ion is basically just a water molecule with one of the protons knocked out, which what radiation will do. It'll knock a proton out of the water molecule, make it a hydroxyl ion, and then that goes on to cause the damage in radiation stuff. So that's why, but C60 will stop a hydroxyl ion, neutralize it back into water before it goes out and causes damage. And but that's all that C60 does. C60 only interacts with the hydroxyl ions and with the superoxide. It does not react with any other oxidative species in the body. So things like nitrogen oxide, that's a vasodilator. C60 doesn't interact with nitrogen oxide. It doesn't interact with hydrogen peroxide. And then
Mm.
there's a bunch of other oxidative radicals that the body uses as signaling molecules, and most of them they're based around sulfur, iron, and zinc. And C60 doesn't interact with any of those. In fact, C60 is the only antioxidant that can actually increase athletic performance. All the other
Mm.
antioxidants, if you take too much, they interfere with the signaling molecules, and then you lose athletic performance. But that's another benefit. We have a lot of athletes that use C60.
Mm. And why do the other oxidants deplete you?
Well, because if you got things like vitamin C and vitamin E, if you get a lot of those, they'll start interfering with hydrogen peroxide or the nitric oxides or some of those other oxidative radicals because they just mop up all the oxidative radicals, right?
Mm.
Whatever it is, they're just going to react with it, even low energy ones. And so you just after a while, your signaling molecules will get damaged, and then if you have too much, so they've done meta studies of vitamin. People take a lot of vitamin C and vitamin E, and they haven't been able to see any increase in athletic performance. In fact, if people take too much, it actually decreases athletic performance because it's one of those balance where C60 it's very specific. It only reacts with those two oxidative radicals and nothing else, and therefore it doesn't interfere with any of the body's signaling molecules. I mean, they've done usually if you're taking C60 and on the animal studies too, you're probably it's like 0.1 milligrams per kilogram of body weight, right? That's usually
Mm.
a good dose that does things in the medical literature. They actually took C60 all the way up to 1 gram per kilogram of body weight. That's like 10,000 times the quote health beneficial dose. And even at that level, C60 had no toxicity whatsoever
Mm.
because it just doesn't. It's all it interacts with the superoxide and the hydroxyl ion and nothing else. No nutrients, no supplements, no other of the oxidative radicals, nothing. And so it basic. Obviously, at those levels, you're not getting any additional benefit, but it has no toxicity at any level, and usually washes out between 4 and 10 days. And so that's kind of the secret to C60 and why it's the only antioxidant that increases athletic performance.
So when you say it washes out in 4 to 10 days, kind of means that your body is clear of any stores. Uh, have you, depending on how long you've been using it for, are we talking about repair and healing, or is it just more like maintenance, like your body
Oh,
continues to need it?
yeah, it does. Well, it does the repair and healing because one of the problems is as we get older, we have this big burden of oxidative damage.
Mm.
And a lot of times, like a lot of weight gain is due to oxidative damage because your body
Mm.
can't handle a lot of the toxins that it's being exposed to. So it just basically stores them in the fat cells and
Mm.
elsewhere in the vesicles inside the cell. When you take C60, now the cells are making enough ATP, and they're also because they're being the C60 likes to hang out at the endoplasmic reticulum. That's kind of a lipid structure, and that's where your proteins are made. So now your
Mhm.
body can produce proteins without them getting damaged. Because well, that's another problem that a lot of people have with health issues is their ribosomes are making proteins, but there's so much oxidative damage, those proteins are being damaged. They
Mm.
get cross-linked, so they can't fold right, and they're useless, and they just basically have to go in the trash can, the vesicles, or they get incorporated into something and they just don't work. And so
Mm.
over time, your body can, once that oxidative burden on your cells is lifted, the body can start making proteins that work and can also start cleaning up all the junk that's been building up all that time that it could never do for because it was overwhelmed by the oxidative burden. And so that's when people find a lot of other healing benefits. As you take C60 over time, you have like these multiple healing effects that people have. Like my macular degeneration and Gary's, that took at least 7 months for me and a year for him.
Mm.
And he was going in every quarter, and he could see the progressive improvement. And so by the year end, it was totally gone. So that's kind of the body can rebuild itself without,
Yeah.
if you lift the oxidative burden that the cells are under, then the cells can run the way they're supposed to. They can start repairing themselves, and and amazing things can happen.
Yeah,
Kind of
this
like
is a common misconception where the damage has been done, and it's not necessarily true. Is this also true for neurogenesis in the brain? Because we hear things like, for example, behavioral development issues with children that have the wrong epigenetic exposures and develop things under the spectrum, or people that lead, got to cognitive decline. So, can we also repair the brain?
Oh yeah, we've had a lot of. This is anecdotal stories of C60 really helping children. Obviously, as a it's not an approved substance, and
Hmm.
so we don't recommend children taking it. It's it's an adult choice or their guardian or parent. So, but we've had lots of improvement that people have had with various issues that children have. I don't know how some things you could say on
Yeah.
that because they get upset. But a lot of autism and Asperger. We've had adult Asperger's sufferers that have taken C60, and they say it's the first time in their life they've felt normal because their social anxiety went away.
Hmm. Well, I can see that because we're talking about, so really the brain has such a high density of mitochondria, and if you're talking about, okay, there may be neural inflammation and damage to neurology, but there's also counteracting that with high voltage and, powerful mitochondria firing and, driving powerful brain performance. So I could see that in theory, anecdotally making making sense. And then there's the gut itself, because if you're saying that this stuff can also heal the gut, and there's this gut brain connection, then, and a lot of young kids that are having behavioral development issues like autism and Asperger's, like you said, um, one of the go-to solutions is heal the gut.
Yeah, well,
So.
yeah, they've actually discovered it's kind of a roundabout process on that, but they found that C60 actually increases stem cell production and
Mm,
then the resulting healing from that. And it actually started with some studies, animal studies on rabbits. This is kind of the pathway because it's C60 was discovered in 1985, got a Nobel Prize in 1996, and it wasn't until the early 2000s that there was actually a method of making it, that there was enough around to be for testing for medical purposes. And like the
mhm.
first toxicology reports they did, they're going to test for toxicity, and they found it actually increased the lifespan of test animals by 90%. That's the
Wow.
famous Botry study. And then there was a lot of studies since that. Now, the rabbit study, they basically damaged the rabbit's joints so it would get arthritis and that would cause inflammation. Then they injected C60 into the joints to, because C60 is anti inflammatory because it destroys oxidative radicals that cause inflammation. And lo and behold, it obviously did reduce the inflammation in the rabbit's joints, which was
Hmm.
not surprising. That was expected. But when they actually opened up the joints and took a look at them, right, because that's what they do in science, they found that C6 that the cartilage had actually regrown in the joints.
Wow.
And they said, well, what's causing this? And so there was some more research in different ways. And what they found is C60 basically destroys senescent cells. And
Mm,
because one of the things, a senescent cell is like a zombie cell. It's usually its DNA is damaged; it can't reproduce anymore, but it doesn't die. Usually there's apoptosis, which the program cell death, the cell will self-destruct, and that's good. But a lot of these cells don't do that, and so what they do is they'll go into the fermentation mode where
mm,
they'll stop doing the Krebs cycle, the ATP production, and they'll go into fermentation mode to kind of get out of that. And of course, they stop providing antioxidants like SOD and catalase to the mitochondria, so the mitochondria have to go into fermentation mode. So now you have these senescent cells in your body; they're in fermentation mode. Obviously, they're producing alcohols and other
mm.
damaging things for the cells around them, and and so that's kind of a problem. But what happens when you take C60? Those senescent cells will uptake C60 just like other cells because fermentation is like 1/20th as efficient as the ATP cycle. So they're
Right.
really just energy hogs. They're sucking anything that they can get out, lots of sugars. So you have these zombie cells that are just like eating 20 times as much as a regular cell. Well, so they uptake C60, and but one of the things is C60 will go into the mitochondria and restart the mitochondria. So now their Krebs cycle starts back up in these senescent cells, And what happens is the mitochondria have their own little DNA and they communicate with the main nuclear DNA of the cell. So the mitochondria will send messages to the main nuclear DNA and they won't get the right message back. And then those mitochondria will cause apoptosis or programmed cell death. They'll basically just blow themselves up and the cell will die. It'll break down into apoptotic bodies, which are non inflammatory, and then the phagocytes will clean it up. And so people that take C60 have a great decrease in senescent cells. And so now your tissue or organ has less cells than it quote should. And so that stimulates the various signaling pathways to produce more stem cells. So, so we people that take C60 have huge numbers of stem cells. That's much more than normal. I think if I could find it in here, that's a little disorganized. Anyway, I can just tell the story. Basically, we had another thing. We have he's a guy about 71. He's okay. I'm active 71 years old today. Today, I had an appointment to receive some stem cell therapy. After separating the stem cells, which were removed by liposuction, they were counted and subsequently discovered I had over 73 million cells. The two doctors processing the cells came rushing into my room saying I had one of the highest counts they had ever seen, especially for my age. Moreover, they wondered what I was doing to get such a high stem cell count. Of course, I told them C60 Purple Power. But
Yeah.
and then 'cause on the Front Range here, we have a lot of stem cell treatment centers, so a lot of them like their patients to use C60 and because it gets that high level of stem cells. And actually, what's another interesting thing is we discovered this on the side. We didn't know it was going what before the stem cell stuff, but people that had taken they had taken telomere tests before they took C60, and then
Mm.
they'd taken C60 for several years, and they had and their average telomere length had increased. We were kind of mystified by that because obviously, if you have antioxidants, you will slow the rate of telomere loss, right? Because
Hmm.
usually, if your cells every time you're for the listeners, telomeres are like little strings that go on the end of the rope that's your chromosomes, and every time they divide, the telomeres get less until your chromosomes get so frayed the cell can't reproduce.
Hmm.
So basically, as you get age, your telomeres get lower, and so we were kind of mystified because obviously if you'd lose like 20 units of telomeres every time you divide if you had it were perfect, but most people because we have oxidative damage we can lose anywhere between 50 and 120 telomere units with every cell division. So we were kind of mystified how telomere lengths were increasing because we couldn't figure how could C60 do that. But what was basically was happening is C60 was killing off the senescent cells, which had very short telomeres. And then they were being replaced by stem cells, which are like baby cells with a full set of telomeres. And so when you take one of those swipes on your cheek or something, doing a test for telomere length, it's the average of thousands of cells, right? Not just one cell. And so what's happening is the average length of telomeres of all those cells. So a lot of the senescent cells die out, are replaced by stem cells. So average telomere length increases, and that's how we kind of figured out what was going on there from those unusual results we were getting.
That's truly phenomenal because people are paying, $10,000, $20,000 to get stem cell treatments and other regenerative therapies. And what you're saying is that your body innately can do this. You just need to create the environment to do it in. And so, when you all of what I've been listening to, it's like, wow, everybody should be taking this. And you have something that was discovered in the mid 90s, then in the 2000s, it was kind of made available, but yet a lot of people haven't heard. So, why is it that people don't know?
Well, that's a good mystery. I mean, in the alternative healthcare space, it's kind of it's getting to be known. It's known if you're an alternative doctor, functional medicine people. A lot of those people know about C60, but it really hasn't broken into the mainstream.
Hmm.
Primarily because then there's not going to be there's a lot of animal studies and most of these are done by universities, but there really hasn't been a lot of human trials. I mean, the original trials, human trials, they put it in a cream. This is back I think 2011, and they found
Okay.
that C60 applied topically would reduce lines and wrinkles in Japanese women. And then they
Mm.
found when it rubbed on the scalp, it would increase hair growth. And they've
Mm.
done some studies on in vitro, the test tube for human skins. For instance, they found C60 when skin cells had it, it helped them resist UV radiation. And
Hmm.
so it's actually and then people know that if you get sunburn and then you rub C60 all over the burn, chances are you won't peel and it'll heal up a lot faster. So, and it also moderates the release of histamines in human mast cells in the test
Hmm.
tube. And then that went to an animal study, and they found that it would prevent the cytokine storm when test animals were exposed to an allergen. So, because it moderates the release of histamines, probably just because the C60 inside the histamine in the mast cells just makes them run more efficiently and react more properly. That's the hypothesis, and it also they did neuroprotective events. They gave human nerve cells C60, and of course the controls didn't get it. They exposed them to neurotoxins, and the C60 cells were not damaged, whereas the controls were. And so, I mean, all of those. There's a lot of, but they're just really. I mean, C60 can't be patented. It's
Yeah.
basically a natural substance, and because it's a natural substance and can't be patented, big pharma can't make any money out of it. Though they have found that C60, a lot of your medicines have the thing at the end of it called HCl. That's hydrochloric acid, and so a lot of pharma companies have found they can attach medicines to C60 with ligands, and it's a replacement for HCl. So
Mm.
they've taken out like tens of millions of dollars in patents on using C60 as a delivery mechanism for pharmaceuticals. So they don't really go after C60 as a product, right? Because that would be like shooting themselves in the foot by wrecking their own patents. But
Yeah.
they certainly aren't going to promote the use of just pristine C60 because that can't be patented, and they can't control it.
Wow, that's phenomenal.
If you want to keep diving deeper with your prescription for life with the Unpill podcast, make sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. I've also written my first book, The DNA Way: Unlock the Secrets of Your Genes to Reverse Disease, Slow Aging, and Achieve Optimal Wellness. Take a look and enjoy, guys.
I mean, so as a delivery method, are you saying that the hack is that they truly are using it to deliver the active molecule, or that it's a workaround to use the 360 but blanket the true sort of
Well,
starting
you never
character?
know. You never know. Maybe the C60 is getting the job done, and the medicine is just along for the ride. I don't really know, but they just that's one of the ways they do. They stick they use a little ligand, a link that attaches that medicine to the C60, and it'll
Mm,
go through because the C60 has some pretty strong bonds on it. It's got the double bond, kind of
yeah,
has not quite double carbon bonds, but you can put a double carbon bond on it, and so it can hold something really tightly and get it through the stomach acid without being destroyed. And so that's basically until it gets in the body, then it'll come apart through other means. But so that's just kind of one of the things that C60 has a wide variety of uses, industrial uses as well. It's just an amazing molecule.
yeah, it is truly incredible. And so, I mean, people like yourself are pioneering getting it out there, and I've seen you at the various conferences and speaking here and there and educating the world. And still today, if you go out, most people aren't aware that this
Yeah.
even exists.
Well, the
Uh,
mainstream media doesn't mention it.
yeah,
And a lot of people, when they watch YouTube, what are they looking for? Cat
yeah,
videos, porn, whatever. They're not really out there searching on how to improve their health and alternative stuff. And so it just never crossed their path for them to even know it. Whereas people that are usually in the alternative healthcare industry, uh, a lot of those naturopathic doctors and functional medicine doctors, they're in that zone, so they learn about it and they can
yeah,
tell their patients and stuff. But if you're not in that kind of area, well, like DNA, getting your DNA tested, that's
yeah,
super important. I remember when I got my DNA tested with you, I mean, it really changed my life
yeah,
because it explained a lot of things and then showed me a lot of things I needed to do just to prevent things from happening that could if I didn't know that information before.
yeah. And one of the shows that I saw you at, it wasn't you, but it was somebody else in the background chattering about C60. And they said that they've been using it as a tool on their long haul patients, primarily around brain fog, and um, not really the clotting, but more the endothelial inflammation. So you got this nasty spike protein that's causing inflammation everywhere. So, and one clinician I remember hearing like, "That's it. That was the protocol. It was C60, and they had formulated and blended it with some other, I think MCT oil, and some other
Yeah,
stuff that was
and
beneficial.
yeah, they get NAC and I think what was that nanokinase?
Right,
Nano,
Natokinase, yeah.
yeah, and those
Yeah.
kind of go together as a package to really help people that have been injected. So yeah, I also got everybody in the C60 industry a letter from a three-letter agency.
Wow, and what was on the letter?
Oh, just basically because people have been saying this, right? Just like anybody else. And so they just said, well, you can't be saying this. We weren't saying it, of course, but they just
Right.
threatened everybody. That's just the way they do it.
Really? So in terms of the claims of what the product can do.
Yeah, because some people were making those claims. And so
Right.
everybody in the industry got a letter. So, and we don't make those claims. And we let other people make those claims.
Wow, 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 wow. So they're tracking, so who we know who we're talking about is tracking your this product, let's say. And if you truly understand what's happening, you have an organization that's 75% funded by pharma. So you wonder what their motivations are. And if their eyes are on you and your product, that to me is a very good sign, because we now have a threat to, disease care and sick care. Um, so whenever FDA is paying attention, I pay attention, because that's the thing that's probably the real solution.
Well, I mean, if you look at look at the board of these three-letter agencies. It's
Hmm.
just an industry capture pass through. It's the
Yeah.
rite of passage. They work for one company, go work for the three-letter agency, then they for a couple of years, then they go to work for another one of those private industry
Yeah.
concerns. And that's actually true in pretty much every government agency, not just the healthcare sectors. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
a
it's
real
crazy.
problem.
It's crazy how unaware most people are, and they think that there's this agency that, what is the intention? It's designed to, sort of protect us, right? But it's doing something very different. So that's a whole other discussion we could have.
Yeah,
That
that
might take
is, yeah,
another.
that's another thing. It's just problems, social problems that have developed here
Yeah,
because of the way the modern world works.
yeah, no kidding. So a big part of the work we do is around female health, because we find it's the most underserved area. So, and then there's these gray areas like menopause and, monthly cycle. Have you seen much anecdotally even around things like menopause and around hormone disruption and women trying to deal with all the endocrine disruption in the environment today?
Well, Jess, Jess, she's our CEO of the
Yeah,
company. And
yeah.
she was kind of skeptical about C60 before she became CEO. But so she had started using it, and she had like her allergies went way down. She
Mm,
was like allergic to everything, so her allergies went way down. And she also had really bad PMS symptoms, and
okay.
those pretty much went away. So that was just gone. She didn't even notice when she was well. Anyway,
Wow.
so that was and her hair started growing too. That's another effect people do. It takes C60, the hair grows faster and your nails grow faster. So all of those things, yeah, that's kind of one of the reasons why she became CEO, because she had all these amazing health benefits, and she said, yeah, that's a product I'd like to be part of. And so
So with hair growing back, I know we're told that when a follicle is dead, it's done. So how is that happening? Are we talking about reviving old follicles?
well, for men, if you got male pattern baldness, it's that's a genetic thing.
Mm-hmm.
And it's primarily found in Northern European peoples because they wore clothes, right? Vitamin D
Mm-hmm.
is a key thing for health. And
Yeah.
so people up north wore clothes. Where are you going to get your vitamin D from? Well, up
Yeah.
top your head. So that's why you get male pattern baldness in basically people in the far north,
Mm-hmm.
because that doesn't. But if you have hair loss for another reason, various hormone problems or other other reasons for hair loss, C60 is amazing at bringing it back. It'll slow down male pattern baldness, and if you add like copper peptides and stuff, you can get some regrowth. But that's a genetic thing that you really can't. That it's actually designed as
Yeah.
a survival mechanism. So it's not going to be going away by C60.
Yeah, it's your human solar panel. You
Yes,
gotta.
that's exactly what it is. Key to health, especially when you live up north. If you live down south, you got plenty of sunshine. You don't have to, and people don't wear very many clothes, so it's never been a problem.
Yeah. So where are you? Just because people haven't heard, like if I talk about rice, omega 3, people know where these things come from. you've given us a description of, the molecule, what it looks like, but where are you actually getting it from?
Well, actually, it has to be made in the lab. Now, you can find it in nature. It's like in a lightning strike on trees, you'll find C60. Like in the burnt wick of your candle, it's like 0.25% C60. But
Hmm.
you'd have to eat a lot of a pile
Yeah.
of candle wicks to get anything. So we make it in the lab at 99.99 or 98%. It's we have it made as sublimation method, and
Hmm.
that's when basically the way it's actually made in the lab is they have a chamber with like a low helium atmosphere. It's made the same way it's made in giant red stars in outer space. So they make like about maybe a tenth the atmosphere of Earth's pressure, and then they have two carbon rods they run electricity through. And if you do it right, you can turn about 10% of that carbon into carbon 60 and a little bit of carbon 70. And then you have to purify it. Now, a lot of companies use methylbenzene, that's toluene, as a purification method. That's a solvent. Um,
Hmm.
and of course, there's always a little bit of solvent left in the product. We use sublimation. Sublimation is when a solid turns into a gas, then back into a solid. So you basically put C60 and the ashes in the sublimator. You heat it up to 400 degrees Celsius, and then the C60 turns into a gas, floats to the other side of the sublimator where it condenses, and that's where you get like 99.99% pure C60.
Mm. Hmm. And I know historically you've been part of projects in the past where, you know, maybe some conspiracy around, like, uh, people trying to hide news and trying to suppress and oppress, and you've been sort of the warrior that's been bringing this stuff forward. So I don't know how much you're willing to share about things that you've experienced in the past, but I've heard some of the stories in the background. You know.
You have to bring up some of those things. There's been so many. Yeah, well, they don't want, it's even in the healthcare system or any other system, right? There's a lot of things that are that they threaten extending financial or commercial interests.
Hmm.
So like C60 and a lot of other, I'm talking about a lot of other supplements that have been attacked or banned or something. They basically threaten the profits of large pharmaceutical companies. And
Hmm.
so they don't want that. They're constantly trying to ban supplements in Congress, right? They're always trying to get these laws passed to ban, vitamin C or or D or any of those things. And then
Hmm.
you only be able to buy your vitamins from big pharma at low concentrations that make them ineffective. So
Hmm.
that's the constant battle that they big pharma does that like every 2 or 3 years. They'll try to pay Congress off to pass a law to ban just your basic supplements, that you take every day, and you have to, people have to get together and fight back.
Yeah.
So
This is, in fact, it's happening right now in Canada again. There's a little wave of the federal government saying they need to regulate natural health practitioners and what they're actually allowed to recommend and prescribe. And it has to be evidence based, which means pharma only, right? Um, it's ludicrous because when you look at what does evidence based means, do you have publications? Look up vitamin C and vitamin D and see how many publications there are, beyond most drugs. It just nobody owns the publications. It's just, it's for benefit of humanity, not a corporation, and so all of a sudden it's not accepted. So
yeah, exactly.
yeah, we have to band together and stay strong and fight back, like you said. Otherwise we'll lose this right. It's really, it's not even a right. It's this is we're talking about access to what Mother Nature has made for us to maintain our health. It should not be considered a choice, right? These
Yeah,
are what you put in.
yeah, it's basically getting to political. I mean, they're really trying to. This is not a new world order. This is just the old world feudalism, where they're
Yeah,
basically trying to roll back history until the lords and masters will own everybody as slaves. I mean, that's what central bank digital currencies are all about.
yeah,
They'll be able to track every transaction you do and tax you. And if they don't want you to buy something, then you can't. They'll just make sure your central bank digital currency will not allow you to purchase whatever they think you shouldn't have. So it's really
yeah,
a fight between freedom and slavery, where an elite group is going to enslave the masses, as been the case in most of history, versus people being able to, to decide what they're going to do with their body and who they're going to vote for and rule over them. obviously you're in Canada, and obviously, the America's claim to be, the great hope of the world. Well, obviously, in the last couple of elections, you've seen just how bad it is, and
Mm,
uh, and it's the same way. I mean, it's just the corruption has really grown here, and in all levels, and big pharma. I mean, is sponsored by Pfizer. I mean, watch the news.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah,
it's
yeah,
big business. So, and
yeah,
that's hard, for for ordinary people. We aren't super organized. We're just living our lives, doing what we do, and whereas these guys can, organize together and try to, take our money and enslave us in their scams to make themselves richer.
yeah,
And I mean, it's actually a classic fight that's coming to a head here pretty quick. So
yeah,
obviously, I
and
see things on, yeah, the Mr. T that you have ruling over you, and he's pretty outrageous. And things that go down.
yeah, and that's why I wanted to thank you because, I mean, the work you're doing, people don't realize the challenges. When you're saying that disease is optional, and when you're saying that the things that we treat and manage don't need to even exist, you're exposing your back to arrows. You're pioneering and pushing this stuff forward for the benefit of me and everybody else. You know, and it's really exposing yourself to a lot. People don't realize that, but you keep fighting
Oh,
through. You keep getting the letters. You keep accepting
oh
them and
yeah.
throwing them in. You know, it's awesome that you continue to do that. And I want to personally thank you for everybody, and for everybody. It's time to support when you have pioneers like this, and you have advocates, and you have people that are on the side of freedom. Let's call it, because your medical choices are choices towards freedom or away from them, because you know that the powers that be that profit from this don't want you to have that choice. Right, we're seeing it quite clearly. So vote with your dollars. You have to be able to have products like this available. You have to vote with your dollars. So uh, Ken, I wanted to thank you. You're showing us a side of something that most people don't even know exists, that is so powerful and so impactful, and it's so elegantly easy. That's the other thing. It's not like here's your regimen of 50 different things have to do, and thousands of dollars in different bottles. You've discovered a molecule that you made easy to use that does a lot. And it just, when things are easy, there's really very little excuse on why you're not going to do it.
Yeah, I think that is one of the nice things about C60, and it is. I mean, it's been hard and difficult, but it's also a kind of a blessing because you go to work and you're actually producing something that brings people health. We get like love letters all the time, or love emails, I guess you should call them,
Yeah,
telling about how C60s got rid of intractable health problems, or people
yeah,
were telling them, oh, you have there's nothing wrong with you according to the test, but they're feeling terrible,
yeah,
and
yeah,
then they get to feeling better, and that's really great to hear, because it's and I mean, a lot of people that do have come to C60, and they're in the alternative because they've tried the standard system, right, and it hasn't helped them, and
mm,
the standard doctors have told them there's nothing wrong with you, but they know something's wrong with them. They wouldn't
yeah,
be hurting and having these problems, but and so they when they discover C60, it really it's helped so many of them.
for sure. Well, thank you, Ken. Thank you again for your time. Everybody, check it out. Purple Power. I've used it myself for a long time now, and I feel incredible. Thank you again for joining us. This was empowering.